Hi and welcome. My name is Stephen Ball, and this is an extract taken from our Developer Direct series, and this is from from season 2, session 6, where we looked at database tools for developers. Now, if you'd like to find out more about Developer Direct, then please have a look on Twitter at #EMBTDD and join the conversation there. But in the meantime, please sit back and relax and enjoy this extract from Developer Direct.
So there's a whole range of different tools that we do provide around the database side of the business. I'm not going to go through all of them, but the topics I think that are kind of most relevant for application developers are the ones that we've got on the screen there. The first one is having a bit more of an advanced capability around developing and debugging SQL, and we'll just talk a little bit around that in a second. Also, as an application developer, you may not be an expert in the world of every nuance and every bit and byte of the database itself. So how can you really try and just make sure that you're getting the best in terms of performance from the SQL statements that you're using? And there's a really cool little tool called DB Optimizer which can really help you with that. And then also, when we talk to application developers all the time, and they're so sorted in terms of version control, version management. How do we work with that? But then often we talk to people around how do they do that on the database side of things, with SQL and changes to the database configuration. How do we actually manage that? And a lot of the time it's just a manual thing. They really don't have that kind of sorted through there. So we'll talk about some of those things. And then Stephen mentioned, I think a few questions just came in kind of on the fly there, as it were, around the database modeling side of things. So we'll also throw a little bit of that into the mix as well. We'll try and keep all this going so it's kind of go through a nice pace and keeping everyone's interest going, hopefully. So just a couple of slides, and then we'll probably dive into a little bit of a demo on a couple of these things as well. So the first thing I guess really is that if we look at the Delphie Ultimate product, so we're actually I feel I'm doing this a little bit back to front at the moment, actually, because I know I've got a slide at the end which explains what's Delphie Ultimate, what's Delphie Architect, what's Delphie Enterprise, and so on. And we'll throw that up in just a minute. But in essence, with the Delphie product lineup and RAD Studio product lineup as well, beyond just the development environments, there is a way for you to actually get access to a number of the database tools in a very cost-effective way. So the first thing we're going to just talk through here is what's included with Delphie Ultimate. This actually includes a number of the database tools, 3 in fact. It includes tools around database development, database optimization, and also database change management. So that's just what we're going to talk through in a second. So the first thing that's included in there, and let me go through some of these slides here, is a tool called Rapid SQL. And Rapid SQL is basically an absolutely fully featured IDE for SQL development and SQL debugging, and hopefully you're seeing the screenshot on the GoToWebinar there. But really, it brings into play a lot of the features that you take for granted inside RAD Studio, inside Delphie, inside C++ Builder, where you get things like the code insight popping up with the suggestions, listing the things that you can put in there. Same sort of thing exactly for SQL development. So you don't have to go off and kind of browse through your database definitions to figure out what was that table name, what was that property, what did I set here. It's all presented to you in a very easy way, just like just like you're familiar with within Delphie itself, for example. So if you are an application developer who's actually doing a lot of SQL development itself, there's a few things in Delphie which help you with that. But really, if you're if you're serious about it, then with Rapid SQL you get access to a whole set of other capabilities. Stepping through the SQL code, stepping into store procedures, looking at all the objects, the database definitions, and it's all tailored as well for the platform you're working with. So whether that's a SQL Server, whether it's an Oracle, or whatever else it may be, you're going to see exactly the information that you need to help you understand what's going on with the database, help you write the right SQL code, and then work with it and integrate it into your application code as well. And Rapid SQL, I think, was actually prior to the the acquisition of the tools from Borland, Embarcadero's core business, RapidSQL was actually the first tool that actually released to market, and it's incredibly popular. We've got all sorts of large users, where they're having to write ad hoc SQL queries kind of on the fly, particularly in finance and also actually pharmaceuticals as well, and other large industries. They use this tool extensively, really just get in there, get the information out of the databases, integrate it into their applications, and make sure they're getting what they need there. So it's very cool, works really well, very easy to use, and gives you a lot of added value there on top of what you get within the RAD Studio and Delphie products in terms of database connectivity. So that's certainly something, as I say, if you are doing a lot of SQL development, if you are needing to do ad hoc SQL queries, getting into the database, it really makes it a lot easier and really helps you out doing that. Okay, so the second area that I'm just going to quickly talk through as well. We've got those SQL queries defined. We've kind of worked through them in RapidSQL. We've debugged them. We know we're getting the right information back. What about if we want to look at how we can actually make that a bit more efficient? So we have another tool that's included in the RAD Studio Ultimate product edition, and that's called DB Optimizer. Now, I must admit, DB Optimizer is probably, from my perspective, one of the coolest tools that we do on the database side. It's such a nice tool, really visual, really graphical, and the best thing is it really helps you actually understand what's happening with your SQL queries in terms of performance. It can also then go on and actually help you to tweak and to tune those SQL queries, and also look at things like indexes. Are we using the right indexes? Should we have more indexes created? How are we going to get a SQL query to perform in the best possible way? But the brilliant thing about it from my perspective is you don't have to be an expert on that database platform to use it. As part of my job, I talked to some of the Oracle DBAs that use our tools quite extensively, and they're talking about running off reports of 40 pages of bits and bytes and trying to work out what's happening where and where this is going, and so on. But what we do with DB Optimizer, in fact, we've got a screenshot there. We present you with a really easy to understand graph, which just immediately highlights the fact that, hey, look at that spike in the graph there. That's probably something we want to look at. So immediately I can see there's lots of activity going on there on the database. We're maxing out our CPU. We've got a whole load of system I/O and user I/O going on there. Can we drill into that and look at that in a bit more detail? And the answer is absolutely yes. So we then just highlight the bit on the graph that we're interested in, drill into it with the detailed analysis from DB Optimizer. It will show us what's actually executing. It will show us the SQL code, and it will then go through and actually suggest some tuning and some hints that we can apply to that to make it better. And as I say, the really cool thing is it means that as an application developer or as a QA person, as a tester, I can actually make my SQL query a lot more efficient before it even gets anywhere near production or even anywhere near the DBAs themselves. So hopefully that also smooths and streamlines kind of our interaction with the DBA team.
Yeah, I remember you talking about this last time, John, and the one thing that really struck me was that to do all this, you just pointed at the server. You don't have to install anything on the server side. You just say, look, here's my server. Go monitor what's going on, and it will pick up everything for you, which is just phenomenal.
Absolutely, and again, that really kind of is a great kind of conversation piece with the actual production DBAs as well, because the last thing they want is an agent or a service being installed on their database server. They're really suspicious. What's it doing? What else is going to impact? As Stephen just said, DB Optimizer, it's a client-based tool. Make a connection to the database, pull some of the system tables, and brings back the information for you. So it has very little impact, and the team here at Embarcadero who developed this tool have a great deal of experience with the different database platforms. And we absolutely aim for I think on Oracle we're now down to some 0.5% kind of additional overhead on the database platform. I think on Sybase, it's maybe up to 1%, but certainly 1% is kind of the top hit that we want to add load onto the database as part of this monitoring. So it's really a really lightweight, easy to use solution, which just works brilliantly. And I guess as you can probably tell, I can talk forever on this tool, but just talking to the customers and users who use it, they genuinely tell us, look, we point this at the database, we monitor what's going on, we drill into it, and within 2 hours rather than 2 days or 3 days, we're understanding what's happening, and we're making it better. So it's as I say, it's for me, it's just one of the brilliant little utilities that really does help you get better performance from the database.
Cool. Now, John, I remember we were having a chat about this kind of thing in the past, and I know Oracle do their own DB tools as well, don't they? Which you can buy to help do kind of some similar things. Is there any kind of advantage to using these over kind of the Oracle ones? Or?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things there, I guess, and I guess one of the first things, of course, is that well, the key things that Embarcadero provides is tools that are cross or multi-platform. So the first thing is if you have got multi-platform databases in there, you've got some Oracle, you've got some Sybase, you've got some SQLServer. DB Optimizer is going to work on all those platforms, so it's not limited just to single vendor platform. The second thing is actually, especially considering with Oracle, some of the feedback we get is the Oracle database performance tools. They're obviously they're good. They can be quite expensive as well, and DB Optimizer is often a very good kind of a good value solution, particularly for developers and QA and testing staff who maybe don't need the full bit-by-bit analysis that some of the Oracle tools provide. And the other thing there as well is that a lot of the database analysis tools will actually they really do work at the bit-by-bit level. So every little bit of activity on the database that's going on, they're capturing, and you then really have to spend a bit of time yourself manually understanding that and trying to work through it. And DB Optimizer takes a slightly different approach. What we actually do is we use a term that we call kind of active session management, and what that means is where rather than capturing bit by bit everything that's happening, we're kind of taking a poll every second of the activity on the database. So we may not be capturing every bit and byte, but if something's taking a long time to run, or if something's happening frequently and recurring again and again, we're going to pick those up. But in doing that, we're capturing a lot less information, and we're really highlighting the areas which say, hey, this is the bit that you need to look at. This is where the SQL statement's taking a long time to run. This is where the SQL statement's running again and again and again. And this is where we're going to get the best kind of payback if we actually go through and tune that stuff as well. So, we don't want to be spending our time looking at the SQL statement that runs once per month and runs relatively well. What we want to be doing is looking at the SQL statements that are running multiple times a minute and are taking a long time to execute, because that's where we're going to get the biggest kind of payback from our time in terms of tuning the SQL statements and making them better.
That seems a pretty common sense approach to take, doesn't it?
And as I say, and the great thing as well is it also means that we're not putting a heavy load on the database server. By doing that kind of polling and trending approach, it really keeps the overhead very low. So it works great in development, test, and also in production as well.
Yeah, it sounds very similar to some stuff that I had worked on. I was doing some POS software for a local authority, and that they're running from one of the tills they had in the catering outlet. And when they were loading up the POS screens, the objects that were running underneath there, there was a slight inefficiency in the design that meant the same statement was getting run for every single button that appeared on the screen, rather than just running it once to get all the buttons and then loading the objects off that returned data set, which meant there was a lot going on. So it sounds like this would really kind of pick up that, oh right, we've got the same statement running time and time and time again in a very short period here. Maybe you want to have a look at that and then kind of point the developer in the area that says, right, this is why it's slow, because this thing's running again and again and again and again. Is there any way you can do something in code to sort that out, or is there something you can do with the statement? So that would work for both instances there, wouldn't it? So.
Yeah, definitely. And as I say, and the great thing is it's really nice visual tool, so you're going to see that kind of spiking again and again, and okay, let's take a look at that. And the other thing I just briefly mention, because I thought this was very cool, was one of our customers also said that they had a number of applications where in-house they'd written the applications using Java, and typically in Java you often find things like object relational kind of mapping frameworks, things like Hibernate, which basically generate the SQL statements kind of on the fly for you from the Java object codes, so that you don't need to write that yourself, which is great for the application developers, as it saves them kind of a lot of a headache. But from in this case, from the production DBA point of view, they were kind of like, well, we don't even know what SQL's executing here. Why is it going so slow? What's happening? What's going on in the database? And again, they pointed DB Optimizer at it, and it shows them the on-the-fly generated SQL statements that are executing, shows them how long they're taking, make suggestions on how they can tune them, how they can create additional indexes to make it faster. So they were kind of like, that's great. That would have taken us days and days to try and work through and track down what's happening. We're seeing it visually now in kind of a half an hour of monitoring and profiling the database. So so it works in a number of different levels, but it really just brings out the SQL statements that are executing and the SQL statements that are taking a long time to execute, so you can concentrate on those.
Cool. We've had a question through from Alf, who's asking, would you need to have the Oracle client installed on the machine that you're running the DB Optimizer tool from to connect up to the database?
Okay, that's a cool question. And I must admit, the whole question of database clients is kind of can be quite a headache for a lot of organisations, a lot of users. In fact, we can connect just using straight JDBC connection. So the only thing you need to make sure is that your user that you're connected to the database with has sufficient read privileges. And again, it's only read privileges on system tables that we document. And as long as you've got those, you can connect just using JDBC and pull that information straight from that. So you don't need to have the full Oracle client loaded at all. And in fact, we've kind of done a similar thing with a lot of our other database tools as now. So things like DB Automation and Rapid SQL, which are kind of more on the DBA side of things, which used to rely on the full Oracle client, for example, they can now make direct connections straight to the database itself without needing that client to be loaded, and that makes it a lot easier to deploy the tools in a number of instances. The other thing, actually, just as an aside, that I personally use as well, if you are working with Oracle, an alternative to installing the full Oracle client, there's something called an Oracle Instant Client, which obviously if you do a search in your favorite search engine, as it were, search for Oracle Instant Client, you can just download it as a zip file, unzip it into a folder on your hard disk. Don't need to install the full Oracle client. It'll just provide the kind of the main DLLs and so on that Oracle needs to connect to it. So that's something that I personally use, because in our kind of we kind of, I guess, live in a slightly artificial world, in that I kind of spend my time doing demonstrations against different databases rather than actually working with an Oracle full time or working with a SQL Server full time. So I really try and avoid having the Sybase client, the Oracle client, DB2 client all installed on my laptop. To just it grinds it all to a halt. So I kind of look at ways that I can minimize what I need to install, and certainly with our tools now, it's much easier to connect directly to them using the likes of JDBC, or using the direct native connection on the tools, or using things like the Oracle Instant Client. So it's worth having a bit of a search around things like that as well.
Okay, and there's also a question here about somebody who's using Oracle. They often have to update their tools because of different version bits. What versions of the different Oracle databases do our tools work with?
Actually, that's a great question, actually, because the answer to that is basically that our tools will actually support more versions than the Oracle tools will support. So we'll go right back to Oracle 8G and go straight through to Oracle 11G as well. Same tool connects to all those different versions of Oracle. No need to install different Oracle clients. They're just going to connect and work with it. So, in fact, that's another great reason that some of the users pick up the likes of DB Optimizer, is because that the latest Oracle performance tools with some of the nice cool features in there, they only work with 10G and 11G. And if you've still got some 8G or 9G out there, it's kind of like, well, what do we do now? Well, DB Optimizer will help you with those versions as well.
And I guess you could connect up to multiple different versions at the same time, could you? If you've got
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Support
Okay.
all those versions. No, you don't need to have any other things kind of in there. So yeah, definitely.
Okay, cool. So what else do we get in there with Ultimate?
So I've been talking for ages now, haven't I? We've only done one slide. I'm going to skip over these ones now.
There's some great questions coming through, so keep them coming, guys.
So I'm just going to skip through a couple of these things. Some of the other nice things in DB Optimizer as well is it includes something called visual SQL analysis. You can see a little diagram on the screen there. It just shows you a visual representation of things like the joins in your query, and it will also show you things like the number of rows that are returned as a result of those joins and the queries that are running. So again, just different ways of looking at the query to help you understand what's happening. And also the bottom part of the screen there is just showing our index analysis, where it tells us which indexes are being used, if we should be creating additional indexes and other things. But I've talked a bit about that already, so let's skip through there. So, as Stephen said, just cracking on through there with the other parts that are included with RAD Studio Ultimate. The final part is around database change management. And again, you might think, well, you know, if I'm an application developer, why am I really concerned with that? Well, a low DB Change Manager has some great features for use in a production environment. We find it's actually really useful for people working in kind of that development and test environment as well. The main things it can do very briefly, or it can do a schema comparison. So, you know, it's kind of like, what's the difference between the database schema in this particular database and that particular database? So if we're looking at comparing our production, our test, and our development environments, you know, that can be really, really powerful, really useful there. Because one of the things we can then do is say, okay, we've been working in development, we've implemented some changes here, we've updated the schema, we've added some new columns, we've added some new tables, updated other things in there as well. How are we going to push that change into the test environment to actually start testing it? And what we can do with DB Change Manager is actually do a comparison to say, okay, well, tell me the difference between our development environment now and what we've actually got in test. And it will go through, analyze that, and say, okay, we've got all these new things in development now, in our development environment. We've got these new attributes, we've got these new tables in there. They don't exist in the test environment. What do we want to do? And one of the things we can do there is say, well, actually, let's generate a sync script. Let's generate the SQL to actually make the test environment match our development environment. So it then automatically push the changes that you've made from development environment into your test environment. And of course, the logical step then is that from test, once you're happy with it, you can then push it into production as well. So it can really help you manage that whole push of changes from changes we've made in development. We've got it in test, it's all working. Let's put it into production in a controlled and version controlled way as well. So it's really powerful around that. I'm trying to think, we've got a little screenshot there. Again, nice GUI interface, easy to use, easy to set up the jobs. The other quite nice thing it does in there as well is we can also actually pull out subsets of the data. So again, we've got production system, we've got our live data in there. If we're in our test system, surely we want to make sure that we're actually testing against real life data and not stuff that's kind of made up or that we just put in there within 11111 and A or whatever else it is. So we can actually extract a subset of the production data from production databases, pull that into test systems and development systems. But if we have got sensitive data in there, like credit card details or dates of birth or anything else that we don't want to bring through to those other systems, we can actually apply masks and filters to those as part of the process. So it'll actually mask those off or jumble them up or filter them out so that the real life kind of sensitive data doesn't get included in there. I'm sorry, it's that. I think I said this last time as well. It's that time of the year for me where I seem to perennially pick up coughs and sore throats from my son at school. So apologies, I'm just taking a little bit of a slurp of water there. Anyway, right. So that's in a nutshell. That's Change Manager. It does some other cool stuff as well. But I appreciate I've just spent quite a bit of time on DB Optimizer, so I'm going to crack on a bit here as well and keep things going. So we've looked at what's included in the RAD Studio Ultimate or Delphie C++ Build Ultimate SKUs. So this really helps us in those three key areas that we see there. developing, debugging SQL, optimizing SQL, controlling and managing database schema changes. The other thing I just want to very quickly show, and I'm going to do this as just a quick demonstration actually rather than slides, is we also have another offering called Delphie Architect, and this is aimed more at people who are maybe more interested in the structure and documenting and understanding and sharing the metadata for the databases that they're working with. As this includes something that we call EOS Studio, which is a data modeling tool for entity relationship modeling, and this includes things like logical diagrams, physical diagrams, reverse engineering to document what we have already, and so on. So let's easiest thing with this one actually to show it. So let me bring this up here. And maybe Stephen or Pavel can just confirm that we've got a
we can see that here.
Yep,
it's looking
cool.
good.
Okay. So one of the I guess one of the big wins that we find with the EOS Studio tool set for data modeling is if you're doing work as an independent consultant or you're picking up some outsourced work where you need to go in and really understand what people have got in place already, and of course their documentation isn't up to date, the guy who did it all originally has left, so they're now in a bit of a stuck state and don't know what to do next. What we can do with EOS Studio is, first of all, we can point it to an existing live database and reverse engineer that. So let me just go through this process here. And in my case, I've got an Oracle database that I'm going to connect to. We support a huge range in EOS Studio, actually, which I'll show you in just a moment. And the nice thing as well is that we support some of the more specialized platforms. So data warehouse platforms like Netezza, Teradata, and so on. We can also work with those as well as the more traditional kind of Oracle, SQLServer, and so on. So I'm just going to log into my database. Step through that. I'm then going to select the things that I want to include as part of the reverse engineering. I'm probably not too interested in the system stuff, but let's pull in some of the views, maybe procedures and packages. And again, this will be tailored depending on the platform you're working with. Yeah, I'm going to bring in all those different objects. I'm happy with that. Just going to select a couple of other options here. And we should be good to actually go ahead and do that. So it's now connecting to the database, working its way through the different objects that are in there, and it's going to start building us up a model of actually what we've got. So this really helps us understand what's kind of in our estate and infrastructure already. I can also structure that in a few different ways here. Actually, let me just rearrange that so it's in more of a hierarchical format. And we can obviously zoom in a little bit. I'll probably make that a little bit bigger so we can see this. And let me just scroll that up. So I might get that there. So here's the kind of the logical view. Let me just bring some of that down here. So we've got both a logical model and a physical model have been generated for us. We can select any of these guys. So here we've got something called broker. Let's look at the detail behind broker. Just double click on that. We'll bring up the attributes that are defined. So we've got a broker ID. It's a numeric. Not allowed to be null, got broker last name, so varchar 40 characters and so on. And you can probably see all the different tabs here. There's all sorts of other information that we'll pull back from this as part of the entity relationship modeling that it's generating for us. The difference you'll see as well is when we go to, say, look at the physical model. Again, I can rearrange that to look similar to the logical one. If we select broker again here, we've got a few different bits of information which are much more specific to the physical implementation. So the logical model is kind of not aware of the database platform we're working with. Physical model is absolutely aware. So here if we look at things like the DDL, this is Oracle-specific DDL that's sitting behind that we can look at as to how it's being defined. Things like partitions, where it's going to be stored inside our Oracle database, how that's going to work, and so on. So lots of good detail behind that. Other really nice thing inside EOS Studio as well is we support what are called submodels. What this means is that I can really define what I'm interested in. So, this is a pretty small model. If I work with a large model, I want to really look at a subset, so I can just kind of highlight areas of the model, right-click, sorry, excuse me, create a submodel, called sub1, when working with that more constrained view. The key thing here is it is just a view, so any changes I make on the submodel or the main model, it's the same change. It's just made in one place. The submodel is just a view onto the main model, and I can also even do that further and say let's have a submodel within a submodel. So I could go ahead and create another submodel in here. Excuse me, and have hierarchies of the models to work with exactly what I want to do. A lot of our users use this to kind of split it into functional areas. So if we look at a model that I've got here, that we kind of one of our demo models, which I think is one of the standard ones that ships with Microsoft SQL Server called AdventureWorks. You can see here I've got my main model, and I don't know if I can bring up my overview window here. This is a bit more of a complicated model. There's a bit more going on here. There's lots of different things to find. What we've done as part of this particular model is we split it down into really kind of functional areas. So things that are related to HR, human resources, are included here. Things that are related to production, we've got those here. Sales in this view, and so on. So the submodels really make it a lot easier for us to break down the model, understand it, work with it, and of course document it. So we're really seeing a visual representation of the metadata, the structure, the schema of our database platform. And as I said, the really cool thing is if you've got live databases out there, which invariably everyone has, if the documentation you've got isn't up to date, you reverse engineer it into your studio, and hey, you've got this live model which is current, up to date, and gives you a nice visual view of that.
Yeah, I've certainly found this useful. I had a really old copy of this that I got with I think Delphie 7 Architect a number of years ago, and I was able to hook that up to a copy of Microsoft SQLServer when I went to work in with some guys who are like a .NET development house. And the reporting tools they had there were, they were so-so, but trying to understand where the relationships was within the data, we knew kind of roughly where the data was going to be. We were able to reverse engineer out the database tables, and from the foreign key constraints and the indexes and everything else like that, it picked up some really rich information, and we're then able to see how everything was supposed to link together properly. And it kind of hugely reduced down the time it took, not knowing their product, to get in and actually be able to generate some really useful reports and point them in the right direction. I think we actually ended up, they sent some of these submodels off down the road. There was an A1 printer nearby, and they got a few of them printed out and stuck up on the wall because they actually helped the development team then see and understand some of the relationships that were running within their product as well, which is quite useful.
Yeah, I mean that's. I think the one of the key things we hear time and time again now, actually, talking to the users of your studio, is the whole idea of better communication. So I think, as you said, Stephen, you were just saying, we printed off a model and stuck it up on the wall. The developers looked at it. We've also got a few more advanced technologies in there now around something we call Portal, and that actually allows the developers who obviously don't want a full copy of your studio. They're not going to be working with the data models, but they want to see these things. They point their web browser to your studio portal. They can browse to the diagrams just using the web browser. They can search on them. Show me everywhere that customer is defined as an entity or whatever else it may be, and get that information across. And that's really been key to certainly some of the larger customers that we work with.
John, one question around this ER portal. Actually, I've got quite a number of questions from some of the customers and prospects that we are working with right now, and they are looking into purchasing the Delphie Architect Edition. And there are some questions regarding the difference between the ER Studio version that is part of Delphie, the ER Studio Developer Edition, and the full-blown ER Studio that is actually the whole family of products. Could you shed some light about differences between these two?
The differences, yeah. So I think actually I have to confess the edition that we include in Delphie Architect. The really nice thing is that you get a full multi-platform edition of your studio included for a very good price. The downside is that it is kind of configured up really for kind of standalone working. So some of the things like the reporting and the links into the shared repository for storing the models in the portal, they're not included inside the one that's with Delphie Architect. So it's a bit more of a standalone solution for a developer, I guess, who's kind of just looking at understanding what they have themselves or what their particular client is working with. So that fits quite nicely in a lot of cases. But if you are a larger organization who's really looking to share the information around different parts of the organization and make that available for better communication, then it might be worthwhile looking at maybe one or two concurrent licenses of the separate standalone ER Studio product. So I know that we've had that. I was talking to one of the sales guys about this, who was putting together a deal for a user here in the UK, and they were definitely in the umming and ahhing. Do we go Delphie Architect? Do we go Delphie Enterprise, but actually buy a couple of standalone licenses of ER Studio and so on, for their particular needs, because they wanted to have multiple people being able to see the diagrams, work with them, share them, version control them. In their case, it actually worked out better to go Delphie Enterprise with a couple of concurrent licenses of standalone ER Studio. So it really depends what your needs are, but just to reiterate, the main differences basically are good points. Delphie Architect, you get multi-platform support in there, so you can point to all different databases, reverse engineer them. Down points, as it were, it's not easy to share the reports, not as easy to share the models across different parts of the organization. So that's kind of how I'd categorize it in one or two sentences.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Obviously, the only thing you can do is obviously put them into an SVN repository, but then you've got some stuff there to work with, but it's not as well integrated as the kind of main portal that we have, which is fair enough. There's a difference between there's a huge difference between the cost of those, isn't there? And certainly, what I found from when I've needed it, having the developer edition has been plenty enough for my kind of situation.
Cool.
Okay, cool.
Well, I'm kind of conscious that we've got to 11 o'clock already now. Now that you guys have got some cool stuff to show as well. So hopefully that's giving people a bit of a flavour of some of the database tools and stuff we've got out there. There are some good recorded videos also up on the website.